All right, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About Human Rights, the show in which we discuss all things related to human rights. I'm your host, Julz Allender, and I'm part of the California chapter of Youth for Human Rights International. Youth for Human Rights International's purpose is to enlighten and educate people around the world on what their human rights are, with specific focus on the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And with this education, to enable and inspire the youth of today as our leaders of tomorrow to stand up and secure these rights for themselves and all people on earth. As you know, for each show, we like to take up one right and try to broaden your understanding of how this right is important to you and your loved ones. For today's show, we'll be looking at human right number 25, and it states, 1. Everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate of the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. 2. Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection. And now let's take a look at a short video about this specific human right.
According to estimates, over 1 billion people live in appalling levels of poverty. Denied even basic standards of food, water. Nearly half of the world's population earns less than.
Now let's examine these ideas a little more closely. Article 25 of the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of themselves and their family, including food, clothing, housing, medical care, and necessary social services. Now let that sink in for a moment. Everyone, not some, not the deserving, not those who have earned it, everyone. And yet here we are in one of the wealthiest nations in the history of human civilization, and that right remains out of reach for millions of people. Families sleeping in cars, children going to school hungry, mothers stretching a dollar so thin it becomes transparent. This is not just a failure of lawmakers and institutions. This is a failure of us as neighbors, as communities, as human beings who have looked the other way for too long. We have confused caring about other people with someone else's job. We have outsourced our compassion to bureaucracies and then wondered why people still fall through the cracks. The hard truth is that no government program has ever truly replaced what a community of people genuinely interested in one another can do. Now, I want to be honest with you because I believe you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort. Rights are not passive things, and they are not given to you by anyone. They are yours, inalienable. From the moment you draw your first breath, no government grants them, no institution bestows them. They belong to you. And that is precisely why only you can surrender them. When a person stops believing they have power to claim their own dignity, to demand their own place at the table, to rise and rebuild, they have, in that moment, quietly handed over the most powerful thing they possess. Not to an oppressor, not to a system, to hopelessness itself. And that is why dependency, however well-intentioned, can be so dangerous. Not because receiving help is shameful, but because any system that fosters hopelessness over self-determination is nudging people towards surrendering the very rights that were always theirs to keep. The goal of Article 25 was never to create a permanent underclass of people receiving care. The goal was to ensure that no human being falls so far that they cannot get back up. There is a profound difference between a hand that catches you when you fall and a hand that never lets you stand on your own. We should be building systems that do the former, the catch, stabilize, and then empower. But now I want to talk to you about one group from whom this conversation must be held to a different and higher standard: mothers with young children. Because here is the truth no political ideology should be allowed to obscure. When a mother cannot feed her child, that child does not wait. When a child is cold, hungry, or homeless, their social skills do not develop the way they should. Their ability to learn, to trust, to grow into a healthy and contributing member of society is compromised, not because of any fault of their own, but because we fail to recognize that investing in that child is not charity. It is civilization. Children are not responsible for the circumstances of their birth. A 3-year-old did not choose poverty. A 7-year-old did not choose homelessness. And yet they will carry those experiences in their bodies and minds for the rest of their lives if we do nothing. Mothers with young children are unlike any other group in this conversation because when we help a mother stabilize her life, we are simultaneously shaping the future of her child. We are not just solving a problem today, we are preventing 10 problems tomorrow. We are quite literally investing in who this country will become. This does not mean we remove personal responsibility from the equation, quite the opposite. A mother who is housed, fed, and supported is a mother who can show up for her child, make better decisions, pursue education or work, and model for her children what it looks like to build a life with intention and purpose. Stability is not the enemy of personal responsibility. Stability is the foundation upon which personal responsibility becomes possible. So as we think about Article 25 today, let us hold two ideas at once, because both are true and neither cancels the other out. Every human being deserves the basic conditions for a dignified life, and every human being given those conditions has the capability and the responsibility to participate in their own story. But it goes even further than that. When a person is lifted up, truly lifted up, something remarkable happens. They reach back. The mother who once needed a hand at the table becomes the neighbor who notices when someone else is struggling. The child who was once hungry becomes the adult who makes sure no child in their community goes without. This is not theory. This is human nature at its finest. And it is how real lasting change sustains itself. Not through an endless pipeline of programs and funding, but through a community of people who remember what it felt like to be caught and choose to be the ones who do the catching. The question we should be asking is not how much do we owe people. The question is, what kind of society do we want to be? And more importantly, what kind of future are we building for the children who are watching us answer that question right now? They are waiting, and they are worth getting this right. Before we get to our special guest for the show, let's take a look around the world at some good news that occurred in human rights. Mongolia becomes a regional leader in protecting human rights defenders. Mongolia has adopted the first ever law for the protection of human rights defenders in the region, making it a trailblazer in Asia. The United Nations top human rights official praised the move, saying, "At a time when some powerful global actors are openly defying and even vilifying human rights, Mongolia's positive commitment stands out. This is a powerful example of a nation choosing to step up when others are stepping back." And the second piece here is invisible children in Bangladesh finally receive birth certificates. For generations, children born in Bangladesh's brothels lived as ghosts in their own country, barred from school, unable to vote, invisible to a system that demanded the names of fathers who would never be known. When campaigners discovered an overlooked 2018 law allowing birth registration without parental information, They began the painstaking work of documenting every child, and now all 400 children in Dalatidiyah brothel village hold their first birth certificates. As one 14-year-old girl said, "My identity has been recognized by the government." All right, so today we're speaking with Ruth Ann Angus. She spent decades proving that peace is more than an ideal. It's a practice and a personal responsibility. Ruth Ann Angus is the founder of Yes We Can PeaceBuilders, a tireless advocate for nonviolence education and a driving force behind the Nonviolent Cities project on California's Central Coast. She believes that human rights are not simply granted, they are claimed, defended, and lived out every day by ordinary people willing to do the work. Please welcome Ruth Ann Angus to the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah,
I'm ecstatic at what you just said in your presentation. Absolutely ecstatic about it. It is exactly where I'm coming from and what we're trying to do here. Yes. Wonderful. What would you like to know?
Well, first of all, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you. And I'm very excited for not only myself, but our audience to learn about the incredible works that you have done. So why don't we get started? Tell us about yourself and how you got started on this journey.
It's a long story, but I'm going to try to make it as short as possible so that we can get all of this in. I think I grew up knowing that human rights were important. I did a lot of work in the peace movement back in the 1960s when I was a young adult. And coming forward, going through life and learning what to do, I ended up becoming a freelance journalist. And I do that work, and I've done that work here in Morro Bay, California for the last 40 years. I've had the opportunity to be able to offer stories of people without prejudice, without opinion, and looking at things from all sides. And one of the things that happened was we really started to suffer with an enormous influx of homeless people in our community. This is a very small town. This is a very small area on this part of the central coast of California. If we have maybe 9 or 10,000 people in the city, that's saying something. So it's not a large metropolitan area, but we have the same problems that any other area has. And that really was understood that we were suffering with a form of violence or forms of violence. And I, for some reason, don't ask me why, but I decided that I had an opportunity to do something about this. And I looked to see what I could do. I really had to dig around to find some resources. And I met a person who is very involved in the peace movement. He is an international peace activist, John Deere. He was a former Jesuit priest who is still a priest in my diocese, Catholic diocese here in California. And I met him online after seeing him at my church at one time. And I asked for a resource, and he sent me to an organization called Pace Beni Nonviolent Service. As I was looking through the things that they do, which is basically nonviolence education, I came across the Nonviolent Cities Project. And this is something that John was the coordinator of. And I, without even asking anybody, I didn't ask our mayor, I didn't ask our city council, I just signed Morro Bay up to become a nonviolent city. And because of that, I had to form an organization with a group of people who would be interested in pursuing such a thing. And that started in 2016.
Wow, awesome. Not everybody's going to jump at the opportunity to do something. So,
Yes.
we're very.
I really felt that I had an opportunity because I was able to write stories in our local papers, and particularly in one that I wrote the entire paper, 16-page paper. And I was telling stories about the community. Well, if you're going to tell the whole story, you have to tell everything, and you have to cover it from every side. And I thought I have an opportunity here to maybe say something that will change the way people are thinking. because we had problems in Morro Bay. I saw things on social media that I found very, very unacceptable in relation to how people felt about homelessness and poverty.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. If you're going to tell the story, you're going to tell the whole story, and then you realize that something has to be done, and you look around and you realize you're it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think, well, it happened. I'm it. So I decided I had to do that.
Oh,
I had to
that
form a group to do that. So we have been in operation for about 10 years. Obviously, things have changed as we've gone along. You can't get away from what's going on in your world. You can't get away from what's going on in your country. But my thrust was that we must look at our community first. Everything starts from the bottom level and works up. It doesn't start, changes don't start from the top down. And you literally look at your neighborhood, look at the street on which you live. Do you know your neighbors, etc.? So that's where I began from that angle.
excellent. And so let's kind of tie this in with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? It guarantees life, liberty, and security. But do rights only mean something if an individual also takes ownership of protecting them for themselves and their neighbors? And I'm curious how you see that balance between the two.
That's a good question. That's a tough question. We have responsibilities. I talk about this all the time because we tend to rely on the ballot box to solve our problems, along with marching off to war, which is another way to solve people think to solve our problems. And there's more to electing individuals to do work for you. The work resides within us. We need to start within us. And part of the nonviolence principles that I learned, John was very good at teaching me these things. It starts with our nonviolence to ourselves. So we're recognizing our own individual human rights. There's a bit of selfishness involved in that, but this is a necessary process. You go on to how are you relating to others in your life? How are you relating to your family? How do you relate to your spouse or your partner, the people you work with, the people on your street? And then it goes forward from that. Once you have gone through that process of learning those principles and how to apply them, then it goes through that process and you end up being somebody that can be involved in actual functional actions that can make systemic change in our world. And I felt it started best in my community. I really wanted some things in black and white written out that our mayor would go along with, that our city council would go along with, work with the police, etc. Because we had all these issues in relation to what was going on in our country and in our community. That's where I began with that. Begin studying nonviolence, particularly to yourself. And I don't, I didn't stumble across the actual Declaration of Human Rights. I'm sure I heard about it in school, but I didn't stumble across it until one of your people from Youth for Human Rights, I believe it was Debbie Cregan, she somehow found out what I was doing and she contacted me and she said, I'd like to come up tomorrow, Bay, and talk to you about Youth for Human Rights organization. And I thought, well, this sounds great. Come on up. And she came along and brought me the materials that you've shown, or what are human rights booklets, etc., and the little videos that we had at the time to show. And I latched onto that because I could see that you can't have nonviolence without the human rights, and you can't have human rights without the nonviolence. So I wanted to marry them together. The appalling thing that I found out is people do not know or understand their human rights. When you introduce it to them, they think you're talking about constitutional rights. And there's some similarity there, but this is totally different. So, yes, how do you affect that balance between your own personal understanding and work at human rights and your responsibility to the community? That's what we're working on.
And yeah, I mean, it's obviously that is that balance. And what have you seen has been the successful way to do that?
I think you have to study it. I believe you have to have the education. I believe it starts with education. And I'm not talking, obviously, we want to have young people educated, but we also need to educate ourselves. And I was very fortunate that there was definitely an interest in finding a better way for us to have a life here in Morro Bay. Um, the youth, I see too many times people saying, well, it's going to be up to the young people as they go on. It's up to us as a group,
Yeah.
all ages, to pursue the ideas and the principles of nonviolence. I use the six principles, Martin Luther King Jr.'s six principles of nonviolence when I teach. And then I can bring in all of the elements about the human rights. I am particularly interested in number 25, which is food and shelter, because what's happening here, even in this small town, is that one third of our population lives in poverty, and our homeless problem was just it kept increasing and increasing. So we definitely had to look at this and see, well, why are we not offering this to people? Why do they not have this, and how do we help them get that? There is an attitude that people think they should have been able to fix their situation themselves, and this difficult, not an easy process. I
No.
have never found trying to do nonviolence education an easy process.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because you would think that it would be very accepting and it wouldn't be hard to do, right? Because not, I mean, I don't know that
No,
innately that.
I don't think people are. Did people care about other people?
Well, I know that's what
If you
I know.
if you're going to go out in your community and you're going to see groups of people begging on the street corner, lying in the gutter, lying around in our city parks, and you go back and you get on social media and you say, let's put them all on the bus and ship them out of here, then you don't have a group of people who are interested in the well being of everyone, do they? They don't think that they are equal to each other, that
Right.
we are the same people, that we are one. So we started to talk about we are all one. We each of us are our own brothers and sisters. Everybody, no matter who they are. And that's the same concept when you talk about human rights, that they are for everyone, just basically because you're human.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's yeah. I mean, I have found that it takes, and this is an unfortunate statement in my opinion. I think it is changing. I think we are becoming a little bit more aware. But the realization in the example you gave that's not my problem,
Exactly.
right? And that's the issue is
Exactly.
it's in my community. They are a part of the human race, which I am a part of. I do have a responsibility to my community and to the human race and to better it.
Yeah.
And right and but
So
I
many people here move to this section. It's very beautiful here. I mean, it's just very beautiful, naturally beautiful.
it is.
And many of us come from somewhere else. I came from somewhere. I originally was in Greenwich Village, New York, moved to California, came up, saw Morro Bay, and said, "This is really where I want to live." And many people had made that choice. So if you made that choice, you want the best possible community that you can have. Therefore, you should be interested in everybody's welfare. But that's not what was happening. That's not what I was seeing. I was seeing way too much of not a concern. And even with our city government. So I wanted the Nonviolent Cities projects want you to work with your city government. They want you to, go through the process with your city council. You're supposed to be working with your police department, et cetera, working on all of the issues that are the human issues that we have to deal with. So my first thrust was to get people oriented to the principles of nonviolence in an education method, go around to groups and give talks on that subject, and then turn around and see what I could do directly talking to the people in power here. And I had the opportunity to do that more so than others because I was a journalist writing about it. So I always had an article in my monthly little magazine style newspaper that got mailed to every household in Morro Bay, something about the process of nonviolence, etc. the process of what do we really think about our human rights? Do we really understand them? Do we think they belong to everyone? And fortunately, I had an editor that was very forgiving and allowed me to do all of that. So long as I didn't come up with it being opinionated, and I have to be very careful about how I presented things.
Right. Yeah. That's great. So you speak about poverty, racism, and homelessness. We've touched on this a little bit, but I want to go a little bit deeper as forms of violence. Okay.
Yes.
Then at the same time, some argue that lasting change also requires individuals to make choices that move them toward dignity and self-sufficiency.
Yes.
So how do you hold both of these truths together?
Oh boy, you're asking a real tough one on that. Um, what I found, first of all, was that people did not understand violence. So we had to develop programs, myself and my group, um, teaching people what violence really is. Most people think, well, I would tell them we were going to approach I want you to live the nonviolent life. And they would say to me, well, I'm not violent. I haven't killed anybody. I haven't hurt anybody. And it's so much more than physical violence. So I had to go back to the university and take some looks at things like Johann Galtung's triangle of violence and show them visibly how there's more violence on a structural and cultural level than there is on the direct level, particularly in our community. We didn't have a lot of murders and things like that here. We had a group of people that was saying that they were not agreeable to allowing others to have the same quality of life that they had. Well, that is part of the problem in cultural violence. And getting them to understand that first, that started to turn how people started looking at each other and bring the questions in their mind. Um, you hope that you're successful at this. As you're doing it, you don't know. I had some very interesting things that came back as questions and issues and problems, and people knocking on my door telling me I've tried to be nonviolent in this situation and da da da, and I can't do this, and stuff like that. It's been a long siege, and we don't have it down yet. I mean, we still have to continue doing this work.
Right. Yeah. It's a journey.
It's a journey, yeah. My friend John Deere, I've helped him put together his organization, the Beatitude Center, and he often will say something. Well, is it God's will that we're doing this, and are we being successful? And I keep saying to him, John, it isn't the end goal. I mean, it would be nice for us to come up with the perfect, wonderful civilization, right? It would be wonderful to achieve that, but it's the journey. It's the everyday that you are working on this, and every day you are attending to that, and you have to attend to it personally first. You have to get that within yourself. We are often very violent to ourselves just in the way we think about ourselves. You ever look in the mirror and say, oh look, I've really put on a lot of weight and this is da 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 da, and you're knocking yourself, or I didn't get somewhere in my life, in my career, da 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 da. In a way you're being violent to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very true. Very, very true. So Youth for Human Rights believes young people, right, deserve to know their rights. It's obviously a large educational platform, and that's who they target. But would you agree that knowing your rights also comes with a responsibility to exercise them and advocate for them?
Absolutely. That's the thing I harp on so much. If you know you have them, then you have to be willing to step out and work for them, for others. I mean, if you really are a good person, instead of being involved with yourself, you should be thinking about what are you doing for others. You always have the concept of, are we helping others? Are we, how are we in the community? I had to do some work on the street where I live, and we've turned out to be a very interesting area here. It's just one short street with about 6 houses on it. And everybody is very different. There's a partisan difference here. We had to make the decision amongst ourselves that we were neighbors and we cared for each other. Therefore, we will look out for each other. We will help each other. And that's the sort of thing that, when you start working with young kids, about 4 years ago, I decided that we really did have to pay more attention to the youth and not just to try to get this nonviolence stuff with the adults, and the kids themselves were really looking for it. I was approached by the local elementary school. I was in Rotary at the time. I still am, but I was in Rotary at that time, being their Peace Builder chair. And we got this request, would you come and work with some of our youth? They have formed a club called the Sunshine Spreaders, and they wanted to work on the problem of bullying on their campus. These are 9 and 10-year-old kids that put this together themselves. And when the authorities at the school saw that they were meeting on their own, they stepped in to give them some help. And then they turned around and said, we don't know what to do, so let's get somebody that knows how to work on this. And that's where I came into it, to get together with them. I sat down with those kids and I said, what do you really want to do? What is your goal? They wanted to change the world. They told me they wanted to change the world. And it was wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
So there's an open door for me to sit down and really start talking about all of these things that we're discussing today. And these are kids there's a high population of children in that school that are either homeless or really have families that are struggling. They knew what they were dealing with, and I thought, wow, they've got it. They've got it better than I had with my adult groups. So it was rewarding to start to do that with them. And I really, the materials for Youth for Human Rights, I latched onto those products, like fleas on a dog, I guess you could say. And I had a very great difficulty. The school districts don't want to take stuff in if they haven't necessarily looked at them. I found any place that I could find where there was an alternative school or a private school or a group outside of school that I could disseminate these materials. I I did so, and fortunately, in working with my city to try to get some of the nonviolent principles across, I was approached by the Parks and Recreation Department to say, would you want to do a program for the kids that are in the after school program? It's basically daycare after the school closes. I thought, ha, 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 I have an opportunity. This little screen that's behind me is some of the things that the kids did with stickers. I would have them work with stickers, and I would give them the little booklets on human rights, and we would choose a topic, and then we would work with what are we doing? What are we standing for? The kids themselves, and have them do drawings and things like that, and just sit there and really let them talk and let me talk to them, and discuss the principles of nonviolence, etc. And I found it was really very rewarding, working with the kids. They're far more open to the suggestions and the work to be done than adults are. So this is and then it really is the future, and we have a responsibility to that. We as adults do have a responsibility to that. I'm 85 years old and I'm still doing this. Don't stop. You can't stop. You have to keep doing it. They are your charges.
Yeah.
You talk about the thing with mothers, etc. Do you remember in our history how our attitudes towards welfare with mothers that had dependent children were? Always hearing this, and well, they're doing it on purpose. They're getting pregnant on purpose. They're having more kids so they can collect from the system. What kind of a thinking is that? How do what can you do to talk to people to get them to stop going in that direction? That's
Yeah.
still out there. That is still out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it says a lot about who you are with what you're doing at the beautiful young age of 85 years old, and the changes that you are creating in children, which is our future.
Yeah, yeah. If I have something to say about being old. It's kids will relate with you. It's easier for somebody my age to work with young people than I think it is the teachers and people in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And you're kind of grandma. I had one kid say to me, my grandpa's 79 years old. Are you the same? Are you that? And I said, I have news for you. I'm older than your grandpa. But then they'll listen. They will listen to somebody. And you can't lord it over them. You don't give it like, this is you have to do it this way, or you should do it this way. I want them to come up with, what do you think we should do?
Yeah.
Let's work that way. And
Yeah.
and then you can help. Then you can start bringing some of these principles in. You can suggest them. Let's look at this and that. Let's look at a video on one of these topics.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
we
I
did
think
that.
it's incredibly important to get their viewpoint, right? And
Yeah,
then let them become self-determined on their observation and what it should be like. And I agree. Children are just, um, they're hopeful,
yeah,
which we
yeah.
need.
Thank goodness. Yes,
We
yes.
need some more dreamers, some
We do,
civilization changers.
and we should never give that up. There's always hope.
There's always
Um,
hope. I agree.
People call me up and do you think peace is possible? I said, of course it's possible. Of course it's possible.
Yeah.
I also decided with my organization that we had to work from a more positive aspect instead of from the aspect of protest. I did never put on a protest type of thing. If we did a sort of demonstration, it was always from a more positive angle. It's more of what are you standing for rather than what are you against, and
Hmm.
that you never ever dehumanize or degrade a human being, no matter what. I wouldn't allow anybody to come to an event of mine and hold up a placard that says something about somebody that's in power right now. But you can tell me anything you want about your feelings about an issue, whatever that issue is, whether it's immigration or whatever it is, of the things that are going on today.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's what do we want, not what do we hate,
Right.
right? Let's put
Exactly.
more
Exactly.
attention on what do we want.
Right.
Great.
Right.
So, across many cities involved in the Nonviolent Cities Project, where have
Yeah.
you seen individuals and communities take personal ownership of reducing violence?
And many of the cities that are in the Nonviolent Cities Project are way larger than my city. I'm the smallest. So you're looking at places, Joliet, Illinois, which is near Chicago, and there's groups in Delaware. There's Austin, Texas. There's Louisville, Kentucky. They have more direct violence occurring in their towns than we do here. The process that we try to do with nonviolent cities is you want to try to get to your government people and see what you can do to have them go along with the principles that you're trying to put across. I was able to get a peace proclamation in Morro Bay twice from two different mayors, two different city councils. And when I wrote that up, I shared that with some of the other cities, and then they went out to try to get the same thing. I do think that some of the people that have gone out in the protests recently, if you're courageous enough to go out on the street to stand up for fellow human beings who are being uh, having a lot of injustice occur to them, you have to be willing to put your life on the line. And this is a difficult thing about nonviolence. A lot of people say nonviolence is passive. It's not passive. It's the willingness to want to be able to literally offer your life if need be in regard for another person or a group of people. And I do see that happening now with the movement. Really, it's many of the cities are really struggling with a lot more poverty than we have here. I couldn't believe it when they said there were 60,000 people homeless in the city of Los Angeles. So if they started a nonviolent cities project, they would have a lot of work to do. It's difficult, more difficult in the larger cities than it is here. But what we do with the Nonviolent Cities Project is we meet every month online and we start talking about what's worked for you, what's not working, and what can we take on as projects to do in our area. So we share a lot of that, and that's very helpful. Um, your personal thing is you have to make a decision. Are you willing to really stand up for the truth and thoughts, truth and words, truth and actions? That's been the thing that we're concentrating on. I have a friend who is a counselor to businesses, and he says you can't change the way people think. And I said, well, you know what, I'm going to continue to try because I don't think that's true. I
Yeah.
think you can change the way people think.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. So you connect today's inequalities. And this is one of the, I think it's really important to do, and I think you do a tremendous job, is you connect today's inequalities to deep historical injustices. How important is it that we connect that history to the violence and inequality that we see in the present?
Isn't it interesting that right now, because we're going through our 250th anniversary of being a country, that there are numberless programs showing up? Particularly, I've just been watching a whole series of them on Netflix about our history and how much we don't know about our history because maybe we didn't get that in school, in high school, etc., or college or whatever. And we need to know a lot more, and we need to be really agreeable that we are not perfect. We have not been perfect in our process. Uh, it's very interesting. Your history is very important. So you have to marry what's going on in your history and then take a look at what you're doing today on that level. It's what did we do to the indigenous people in this country? What did we do to the black people? What are we still doing to them? Um, these are forms of violence that are still going on. And you can look back at your history and you can be honest about it and you can be forgiving. And I think that that's a really necessary element. You have to start to forgive, even ourselves. You're held accountable, and you should be accountable. But there's a quality of forgiveness in there. Understanding how this country came about and how we did all of the things we've done, and where we are now, it's an education process. So yeah, I think we need to look at all those things. There's definitely a balance that's out of balance at this point. I think we're out of balance at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I agree. So, looking ahead, what gives you the most hope that we can build a better world where nonviolence is the norm and every person's human rights are truly protected?
If I have one person, if I only get one person who will understand what I'm saying in relation to nonviolence principles and all of the 30 basic human rights, because one of your questions to me before we did this program was which one is important to me. Well, yes, 25 is very important to me because I'm trying to do something about our homeless situation. All of them are important, all of them together, and you can't just take one and say that's the solution. They're all the solution. I was just stoked, to tell you the truth, when I got something on social media that Pope Leo just put out. And I'm just going to read a little of this to you. It's
Sure,
very short, if you don't mind.
sure.
This was his last paragraph in an encyclical he recently put out, and he was talking about all our ideologies. And he says, among these ideologies, I consider particularly insidious the one that suggests that every person must earn or justify his or her own worth to the point of attributing greater value to those who are more efficient or effective. From this perspective, persons end up being reduced to a means of achieving results, a resource to be used and exploited, and are no longer recognized as a proper end in themselves, who should never be instrumentalized. The value of persons, however, does not depend on what they achieve or produce. There are rights that apply to everyone simply by virtue of being human, and no human power can legitimately deny or arbitrarily limit them. All of the comments in this social thing that showed up on Facebook, maybe 40 or 50 comments, nobody came forward recognizing that what this man was talking about is our basic human rights until I put it in. Yes, these are our basic human rights, and they are for everyone, regardless, just because you are human.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I can't thank you enough for what you do for your community and the communities across not only the United States, but I'm sure you've touched, people globally. So,
Hope so.
yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time being on the show today and sharing your message and sharing the works that one can do and what nonviolence can look like and what it should look like. And it's just very inspirational. So thank you.
I hope everyone will go look out and seek a group and get involved. It's there's plenty of work to do. Remember,
Absolutely.
we're on the journey. We're still on the journey.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that you did.
You're very welcome. All right. Well, that's our show for this week. I hope you enjoyed it and you found some valuable information and you got inspired to join a group and start helping. And until next time, I'll see you then.